Okay, we are continuing the 613 commandments up to not. So we just talked about the sabbatical, the Shemitah, not to work the land in the 7th year. So also not to work with trees to produce fruit during that year, not to reap the crops that grow wild in that year like in a normal manner. What that really means is not to. This only applies in the land of Israel. And I want to remind everyone that when you go to the museums and you learn about what was here when Europeans came here, it was not Shakespeare. I just read this recently online. It was not European culture because America was colonized. But when you look back in Israel, what's there is Hebrew manuscripts. That's what's available in Aramaic, because the Jewish people, the Israelis, are indigenous to Israel. So anyway, this is only applicable in Eretz Yisrael because this is applying to an indigenous people. So regarding the normal manner, what that means is not with a whole extensive preparation, not in bulk. Anyway, not to gather grapes which grow wild that year, also in a normal manner. To leave free all produce which grew in that year. Doesn't mean the owner's not allowed to eat from it. It just means you can't prevent anyone else from eating from it. It's not belonging to you. To release all loans during the 7th year, not to pressure a claim from the borrower, not to refrain from loaning immediately before the release of the loans for fear of monetary loss. And you could see how you have to have faith in God for any of this. Trust, really. The Sanhedrin, the main court, must count 7 groups of 7 years, the 7 cycles. The Sanhedrin must sanctify the 50th year. This is called a jubilee. So really you have like 2 jubilees. You have 2 sabbatical years in a row, because you have the 49th year is the 7th year of that cycle, plus 7 times 7, then you have a 50th year, which is like a sabbatical year. To blow the shofar on the 10th of Tishrei to free the slaves. Not to work the soil during the 50th year of Yovel, a jubilee. In Hebrew we call it Yovel. Not to reap in the normal manner that which grows wild in the 50th year. Not to pick grapes which grow wild in the normal manner in the 50th year. To carry out the laws of the sold family properties. Not to sell the land in Israel indefinitely. To carry out the laws of houses in walled cities. The tribe of Levi must not be given a portion of the land of Israel. Rather, they are given cities from the tribes to dwell in. The Levites must not take a share of the spoils in the war. To give the Levite city, one of the commandments is, so remember, we have some are do nots and some are do's. So here, to give the Levite cities to inhabit and their surrounding fields. So in other words, they have to have fields around the cities. Not to sell the fields, but they should remain to the Levites before and after the Jubilee year. To build a temple. Not to build the altar with stones that were hewn by metal. Not to climb steps to the altar. To show reverence to the temple. To guard the temple area. Not to leave the temple unguarded. To prepare anointing oil. Not to reproduce the anointing oil. Not to anoint with the anointing oil unless the right way in the temple. Not to reproduce the incense formula unless at the time of the temple. Not to burn anything on the golden altar besides incense. The Levites must transport the ark on their shoulders. Not to remove the staves from the ark. The Levites must work in the temple. No Levite must do another's work, or of either a Kohen or a Levite. To dedicate the Kohen for service. The work of the Kohanim's shifts must be equal during the holidays. The Kohanim, or the priests, Kohanim as priests, must wear their priestly garments during service. Not to tear the priestly garments. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, must not, his breastplate must not be loosened from the ephod, which is like an apron. The king must not have too many wives, or too many horses, or too much gold and silver. There's a commandment to destroy the 7 Canaanite nations, and not to let any of, and that's a positive, to destroy them, and the negative is do not let any of them stay alive. Let's continue. So we have the priest must not enter the temple while intoxicated, let his hair grow long, or enter the temple with long hair, must not enter the temple with long hair grown, with torn clothes, or indiscriminately, or leave the temple during service, or send the impure from the temple, to send the impure from the temple. Impure people, the Kohen cannot, the priest cannot leave the temple during service. Then there's a commandment to send the impure from the temple, and that impure people must not enter the temple, or the temple mount area. Impure priests, Kohanim, must not do service in the temple. An impure Kohen following immersion must wait until after sundown before returning to service. A Kohen must wash his hands and feet before service. A Kohen with a physical blemish must not serve. A Kohen with a temporary blemish must not serve. A Kohen with a physical blemish must not enter the sanctuary or approach the altar. One who is not a Kohen must not serve. To offer only unblemished animals. Not to dedicate a blemished animal for the altar, and not to slaughter it, not to sprinkle its blood, not to burn its fat, not to offer a temporarily blemished animal, not to sacrifice blemished animals even if offered by non-Jews, not to inflict blemishes upon dedicated animals. To redeem and the next commandment, to redeem dedicated animals which have become disqualified, to offer only animals which are at least 8 days old, not to offer animals brought with the wages of a harlot or the animal that was exchanged for a dog, not to burn honey or yeast on the altar, to salt all the sacrifices, not to omit salt from these sacrifices, to carry out the procedure of the burnt offerings as prescribed in the Torah, not to eat its meat, and to carry out the procedure of the sin offering, not to eat the meat of the inner sin offering, not to decapitate a fowl brought as a sin offering, to carry out the procedure of the sin offering. The Kohanim must eat the sacrificial meat in the temple. The Kohanim must not eat the meat outside the temple courtyard. A non-Kohen must not eat sacrificial meat. To follow the procedure of the peace offering. Not to eat the meat of the minor sacrifices before sprinkling the blood. To bring meal on the offerings as prescribed by the Torah. Not to put oil on the meal offering of a sinner. Not to put frankincense on the meal offering of a sinner. Not to eat the meal offerings of a Kohen. Not to bake a meal offering as leavened bread. The Kohanim must eat the remains of the meal offering. To bring all avowed and free will offerings to the temple on the first subsequent festival following the free will offering avowed. Not to withhold payment incurred by any vow. To offer all sacrifices in the temple. To bring all sacrifices from outside Israel to the temple. Not to slaughter sacrifices outside the courtyard. Not to offer any sacrifices outside the courtyard. To offer 2 lambs every day. To light a fire on the altar every day. Not to extinguish this fire, and to remove the ashes from the altar every day. To burn incense every day, and to light the menorah every day. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, must bring a meal offering every day. There's a commandment to bring 2 additional lambs as a burnt offering on Shabbos. What are we up to? 381. To make the showbread. To bring additional offerings on Rosh Chodesh, which is the first day of the new month, every month, 12 months, and sometimes 13 months on a leap year. To bring additional offerings on Passover. To offer the Omer offering, which is a 7-week period, from the meal of the new produce. The Omer offering, the meal of the new produce, happens for 7 weeks from the second day of Passover after the first night till the next holiday of Shavuos, which is when the Jews so the Exodus and the receiving of the Torah. Each man must count the Omer 7 weeks from the day the offering was brought. To bring additional offerings on Shavuos, that was the holiday of receiving the Torah, and to bring 2 loaves of the new produce on Shavuos. To bring additional offerings on Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. It's the new year on the date that's also the head of the year. It commemorates the day when people were born, not the new year according to the earth, according to humans. To bring additional offerings on Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, 10 days after Rosh Hashanah. To bring additional offerings on Sukkot, which is the holiday in the fall, in the booths, surrounded to remember in the desert the clouds of glory, like a hug from God, protecting from anything. And then the day after, which is called Shmini Atzeres, it's a special gathering on the additional day. In the diaspora, it's on Simchas Torah and Shmini Atzeres are on 2 different days. Simchas Torah means the joy of the Torah, and in Israel they're on the same day. So to bring additional offerings also on Shmini Atzeres. Not to eat sacrifices which have become unfit of blemish or blemished, unfit or blemished. Not to eat from sacrifices offered with improper intentions. not to leave sacrifices past the time allowed for eating them, not to eat from the sacrifices which was left over, from that which was left over, not to eat from sacrifices which became impure. An impure person must not eat from the sacrifice. There's a commandment to burn the leftover sacrifices, to burn all impure sacrifices. There's a commandment that a Kohen, a priest, must not defile himself by going to any funerals or cemeteries for anyone except relatives. There's a commandment to appoint a king from Israel. There's a commandment not to appoint a foreigner as the king. There's a commandment to mourn for relatives. A commandment for the high priest to not defile himself for any relative. And the high priest must not enter under the same roof as a corpse. For example, even a hospital would be dangerous. And last but not least, to follow the procedure of Yom Kippur, the 10th day after the beginning of the new year, the Day of Atonement, in the sequence prescribed as in Parshas Achrei Mos, which is the portion that comes after the death of Aaron's sons, according to the Bible Torah. I'm going to read a few more here. Not to curse your father and mother, not to strike your father and mother, to fear your father and mother, and not to be a rebellious son, and to respect your father and mother. One who misappropriates consecrated property must repay its value plus a fifth and bring a sacrifice, and not to work consecrated animals, not to shear the fleece of consecrated animals, and to slaughter the paschal sacrifice at the specified time. So Pesach, the sacrifice of Pesach was the sheep. Could actually be sheep and goats, I just learned, but sheep. It's called overcapered when you put sheep and goats together. But in the Talmud they talk about how it's most important to do a sheep at the time in Egypt, because that's was to show that the fire could in fact consume a sheep, which they believed in Egypt that the sheep was a god and the Aries was a ram, and it used fire to punish anyone who didn't worship it. The specified time, so it happened in the month of Nisan. On the 14th day was when the holiday of Pesach started, so they had to do it on the day that before the Exodus. Not to slaughter it while in possession of leaven, and not to leave the fat overnight. Not to slaughter the second paschal sacrifice if one would. To slaughter the second paschal sacrifice if one was not able to bring the first, and to eat the paschal sacrifice with matzah mar on the night of the 15th of Nisan, and to eat the second paschal sacrifice on the night of the 15th of Iyar. Not to eat the paschal sacrifice raw meat, raw or boiled, and not to remove the paschal meat from the confines of the group. An apostate must not eat from it, and a permanent or temporary hired worker must not eat from it. An uncircumcised male must not eat from it, and not to break any bones of the paschal offering. And also not to break any bones from the second paschal offering. Not to leave any meat from the paschal offering over until the morning, and also not to leave any meat from the second paschal offering over until the morning. Not to leave the meat of the holiday offering of the 14th until the 16th, and that's a good place to stop. So we're at 4:20, but we did do others in the meantime. So just to make a comment, why was there a second paschal offering? Is because they said, well, we were impure because we were helping a dead person, to bury them, to do all the rites and rituals we were supposed to do. Why should we be punished? And Moses asked God, and God said they have another chance in 1 month, a second chance. And it says even if someone's very far away, that's a good enough excuse. They could do it the second month. All right, all the best. I wish you a good night. And it's a holiday of Tu B'Av, so I will not be recording a video for Monday. Tu B'Av is the joyous day where matchmaking is the energy, and borrowing something white, the women would dance. Now, why did they borrow? So that if someone didn't have, they wouldn't be embarrassed. May we all feel correctly matched up, loved, approved of, that just who we are is exactly right for the one who appreciates us and we belong to. And it can always get better. Whatever we're up to, it can always get better. We can always be beloved and have passion and romance and excitement, and it starts with God. When I say God, I mean it starts with what we're willing to receive, how much we're willing to receive, how far we're willing to go, how much we're willing to let go.